And I see it as analogous as to like weight loss or weight management and your heart health. Everybody talks about your blood pressure and your cardiovascular health, as far as like your risk for stroke and heart attacks and stuff like that. You need to manage your weight. You need to eat right and exercise. The alternative is take all these medications to manage it. Or diabetes is similar too, right? You can live with kind of elevated blood sugar for a while, then you reach a certain threshold and the doctor's like, all right, now you need to start metformin. Then your pancreas gives out and now you need to start on insulin. But it could be prevented if you just eat right and exercise. Same thing with this muscle imbalance. You could exercise your whole life and live a very active life doing whatever the heck you want to do. We see people in their 80s still running and skiing and weightlifting, playing active sports, but they have good muscle balance. And we just don't get taught that in school. It's not common knowledge. It's not researched at all. Medical people aren't telling people this.
Welcome to the Thrive with Kate Stillman podcast, made for you by us.
All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the Thrive with Kate podcast, and I'm really excited to talk to Dr. David Middaugh of El Paso Manual Physical Therapy. His website is epmanualphysicaltherapy.com. And I found you, Dr. David, and I just feel so trite, but I was more or less debilitated from bone-on-bone hip arthritis. I'm 51 years old, very active, very athletic, all the things, very much a biohacker.
That's probably why you look much younger than your age.
So I use Crowd Health. I know you listened to the Crowd Health episode, which is like an alternative to health insurance. And they're like, well, go see an osteoarthritis person. And, so I went to the doc and they did the x-ray and they're like, see, it's right there. It's bone on bone. And if you want your quality of life, like the only thing we can really offer you, because you're already doing yoga and exercises, the only thing we can really offer you is surgery. So we scheduled the surgery. And then I went home and I think even on the way home, I just like typed in on YouTube, how to prevent, like if you already have the diagnosis, and you popped up. So I've binge watched your YouTube channel. You have 742,000 followers on YouTube for your how to prevent surgeries for knee arthritis and hip arthritis. So welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
It's an honor. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Kate.
So I'd love to just hear, from the methodology, and I've been a diligent student of yours now for 5 weeks, all for free on YouTube. I haven't yet bought your program, but I probably will. Okay. On this whole concept of it's a muscular imbalance.
Yeah.
And so if we can relearn how to strengthen the right muscles for everyday activities like sitting, standing, walking, then the pain goes away. Then we don't need the surgery. So I just would like to start with how did this all happen, that you started the channel, that you focused in on this particular problem, and just take us through your story.
Okay. Well, the pandemic was a big thing that pushed me into the online space, because before that, I had a clinic. I was just a guy with a PT clinic, and it was me and one, sometimes two other therapists. But of course, once the pandemic happened, then we had to figure out how to still help people virtually. And I had already been wanting to make like a productized version of my treatment. I had already been putting out YouTube videos with bits and pieces, because on YouTube you can't have videos that are way too long. I mean, you could upload them, but it's kind of tiring to watch a 3-hour YouTube video. So ideally, if you want to get a snippet, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, that's the best. So I had been putting up videos like that, but then I started making programs, and then we started to listen to what people were saying from the programs, and from the YouTube videos too, because some people were talking about how they had specific conditions. Because at first, my first program was just general knee pain. It was guided towards helping those people. Then we started to get people that said I have knee arthritis, I have a meniscus tear, I have a hip problem too, and they were asking for more specific help. So we started to expand our programs, and as a result of that, expand what we were offering on YouTube. And now it's grown, it's just snowballed, and we're so excited that we have this opportunity to help out people all over the world prevent surgery because it's literally what we can do. And something I wanted to mention before we get too far into it is I think primally when it comes to this stuff and because you were talking about the muscle imbalances and just to I've never said this anywhere else, but just to kind of give you the background in my thinking, like get inside my
Yeah.
head a little bit. If you think back to how people used to live before our modernized times, where we sit all day, where we have school that lasts 18 plus years, depending if you go to college or not, and then how
Mhm.
we have uh, desk jobs now and we sit and watch screens all day. It wasn't like that before. And if you go to third world countries, people are very active. They're standing most of the time. And so the physical position of our bodies has really changed just recently in history, in human history. And because of that, now we spend more time sitting than ever. And when you sit, you're sitting on your butt muscles and you're squashing those muscles and you're also stretching them out because when you bring your knee up, it adds length to the back of the hip. And we've proven this in research. A clear way to make muscles weaker is to add a low level stretch and then smash them, which is exactly what we're doing all day to our poor butt muscles. And this causes a bunch of other problems because now when you want to be active, like you want to go exercise, you want to go on a walk, on a hike, or even just take care of your chores, but you have a desk job or you've been in school all day, we see younger and younger people develop arthritis now because of this. They're compensating with muscles because the body is just thinking, how do I do this thing that you want me to do? It's not thinking, well, let me use this muscle first, then that muscle. It's just we're gonna go on a run. We're gonna go lift some weights. And if your glute muscles aren't ready to help because you spent 12 hours a day sitting for the past 18 years of your life,
Mm.
then you're gonna compensate. And usually it's the muscles on the front of the hip and the front of the thigh that start to do that. And then just depending on your specific genetics, where you break down first, it
Mm.
might be your hip that bothers you, it might be your knee that bothers you. Some people get nerve problems, some people get back problems. There's a ton of other things that it leads into after that.
I mean, the part that really captured my attention, especially for those that are listening that are whatever, you've either already had the surgery or you're thinking about the surgery or whatnot, is it's like you're gonna have to strengthen these muscles anyways. Like the problem's not going to go away. So you might as well start to learn how your body's supposed to work. Now, I already had decades of experience in yoga and alignment, pranayama, various breathing practices, a lot of self-care practices from Eastern holistic medicine. So it's not like I'm a low level body awareness person. And yet, and for me, what put me over the edge, and I just want to share this part of the story because one of the things I've realized since then is like a lot of people can end up with this diagnosis from very many different avenues or pathways. So for me, it was a radical hysterectomy that created internal scar tissue that pulled the fascia, right? So just like literally pulled the head of the femur bone deeper and more forward in the hip socket.
Jeez.
And I didn't do the sort of the physical therapy after this. I was more worried about cancer than I was about,
Yeah.
PT. And often PT isn't diagnosed after certain types of surgeries like this, where I knew I was working on my scar tissue, but I was like, I had no idea how deep in I was into just debilitation.
Yep.
So I guess I'm curious, like how you see, you mentioned younger people because of just sitting, 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 sitting. What else are you seeing in terms of like the various ways people end up with the diagnosis?
Well, when you say diagnosis, I assume you're talking about like arthritis, like hip.
Arthritis, where we need a replacement surgery. So yeah.
So I was just looking at some studies recently as we're getting prepared to make some more content for our programs and all that. And this one study that I saw that was looking at the lifetime cost of arthritis, of living with knee arthritis, which it's crazy. Subscribe to our channel if you want to catch it. It should be coming out sometime soon. But they said on this study that the average age of the 200 plus people that were in the study for diagnosis of arthritis was 53.5. Right? Like you would think it's 60s or 70s. 53 years old. In your early 50s, most people develop arthritis. And these are all US people, so take that into account. But it's not that old. You're there pretty much, right? You're on the younger end of it. And we see this all the time. The reason why this happens is because you need to look at it as a spectrum. So when you're younger, like when you're in your, say your teenage years, your 20s, when you're a kid, maybe doing sports, maybe doing high school PE, that kind of thing, the injuries that are more likely to come at that point are like sprains, strains, on the more extreme end, like an ACL tear, which is a sprain is like you injured a ligament but didn't tear it. But a tear, an ACL tear, it means you tore the ligament. That might happen early on, and it could be set up from muscle imbalances, like what I talk about.
Mhm.
But then when people get into their 20s and 30s, and they tend to get things like meniscus tears in the knees or labral tears in the hip, which are cartilage related injuries. Then when you get into your 40s and 50s, if the same muscle weaknesses are carrying on throughout the decades, then it turns into arthritis. And it's just pressures in the joint that end up causing damage. At first, it's ligaments in your earlier years, then the cartilage in the next decades of your life, and then towards the middle last decades of your life, now you have arthritis, which is a combination of cartilage and now the bones change. You're starting to get lumps on the bones, osteophytes, bone spurs, those kinds of things.
Mm. That makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense that it's the same thing. So what I'm hearing and what you're saying is the how to treat from a more muscle imbalance perspective is the same throughout those life cycles, those
It is
stages.
the same muscle imbalance that causes the ACL injury that happened by yourself walking or playing sports. Like the classic is the soccer player in high school, 17 years old, and just cuts wrong and falls over and they tore their ACL. Nobody bumped into them. There was nobody fell into them. No accident happened. What happened is they had a muscle imbalance and it's just been building up. And their compensation strategies and their muscles have changed because they've been sitting on their glutes all these years of school
Yeah.
and their leg can't stabilize properly and it made their knee buckle odd and tore their ACL. Then if that muscle imbalance continues as they get older, maybe that person's active. They want to be, cycling, biking, lifting weights or something. As they get older, kids might come into the picture. You got to keep in shape. Then you're wearing down the meniscus next, and then you're wearing down the rest of the joint after that, and it just follows you throughout. But it's the same muscle imbalance, the same darn muscle imbalance.
You just told my whole life story. So ACL surgery, meniscus surgery.
No way. You had both of those?
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
sorry,
ACL.
Kate.
You're pretty close on the ages. ACL was 22 skiing.
Yeah.
And then meniscus was, I think, paddleboarding, stand-up whitewater paddleboarding injury, maybe around 42. So yeah, you've got me nailed. I'm wondering how many of the people listening are also telling, and you think if you're athletic, you just, we've been trained to like, blame the injury, right? Not the underlying.
Yeah. It's just to like weight loss or weight management and your heart health. Everybody talks about your blood pressure and your cardiovascular health, as far as like your risk for stroke and heart attacks and stuff like that. You need to manage your weight. You need to eat right and exercise. The alternative is take all these medications to manage it. Or diabetes is similar too, right? You can live with kind of elevated blood sugar for a while, then you reach a certain threshold and the doctor's like, all right, now you need to start metformin, then your pancreas gives out and now you need to start on insulin. But it could be prevented if you just eat right and exercise. Same thing with this muscle imbalance. You could exercise your whole life and live a very active life doing whatever the heck you want to do. We see people in their 80s still running and skiing and weightlifting, playing active sports, but they have good muscle balance. And we just don't get taught that in school. It's not common knowledge. It's not researched at all. Medical people aren't telling people this.
Yeah, so let's pause right there. So I mean, when I go back to my visit with the surgeon, right? And we do the x-ray, we do this little consult, we do the flexibility tests. He's asked me what I've done, blah, blah, blah. There's no analysis of this muscle imbalance. So what is it going to take to change the industry, in your opinion? Like what, Yeah, I know, right? It's like the initial conversation. Can we change the insurance industry? Probably not. So get Crowd Health. Listen to that episode. We'll put the link in the show notes. But is it the same deal? Is like they're not, because they're not incentivized to, because they make all their money off surgeries and it's expensive to run a clinic?
Yeah, it's the same reason why you don't see commercials for broccoli.
Yeah.
Who's going to fund that? It's just not, it's very profitable to make a pill that costs, less than a dime and sell it for 1,000x that amount. And I
Yeah.
mean, we can go down that route of talking about pharma and reimbursement and all that stuff. But I think even deeper than that,
Mm-hmm.
it's the thinking and the history of how this has gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a while back, I made this video about Dr. Semmelweis. Have you ever heard of Dr. Semmelweis?
Mm-mm.
This was the guy, he was like the guy that started hand washing in the late 1800s.
Oh,
He was working, he was a physician who was helping mothers deliver babies via C-section. And this was in the 1800s. So you can imagine what the conditions were like and the technology was like and all that. And his facility was next to a natural place that has like midwives, right? And we had four children, my wife and I, and all of them were born in the midwives. So I'm very familiar with this. And I love the thinking that the midwives have because they're like, if you're normal and healthy, you should probably have a midwife if you're open to it. If you're at risk for problems, then you should probably go to the obstetrician because they're the specialist in dealing with complications with births and pregnancy and all that. So we got that, and thankfully my wife was healthy. And anyways, going back to Semmelweis, he started to notice that people in his facility, mothers, were dying. And then he started to connect. He said, well, some of my surgeons are going from an autopsy to doing a C-section and never washing their hands in between. But everyone at the midwife place is doing better. They're not dying like they are here. So he had all his doctors wash their hands in a chlorine solution between patients, and all of a sudden the death rates went down and people started living.
wow.
He was shunned in the medical community. The doctors, I think, I don't know the rest of the story. I don't know if there's any information out there, but my hunch is that the doctors in the community probably were trying to save face. They didn't want to admit that they've probably been responsible for a lot of bad, and they didn't want to change their ways. So they had this doctor put into a mental place, a place. Yeah, they had him committed basically. And he ended up dying from injuries he suffered while being committed.
Oh
This
my
was like
God.
in the early 1900s. Hand washing didn't become normal until like the 60s or 70s
Oh my God.
after he died.
Yeah.
It takes a whole generation
Yeah.
in the medical field for I think people have to kind of retire, pass away, and the new generation has to come in for the
Yeah.
thinking to change.
Yeah.
As far as like health insurance and pharmaceuticals and if you can go into the whole healthcare industry, I think it's going to be a generation of change. But I'm thinking, with the help that I can give to people that have arthritis, they have arthritis today and they can't wait 10 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
So I need to talk about it now.
Yeah. So I was on the chairlift because I'm a skier. So I'm like, okay, I
Me
started
too.
following you and I'm like, this was 5 weeks ago, right? I was supposed to have the surgery, whatever, 2 weeks ago. But instead I
Yep.
was like, I'm gonna do these exercises 5 times a day. And then it started snowing a lot. So I'm like, I gotta go skiing. So anyways, I was on the chairlift and I was in Utah, and this woman who I was on the chairlift with, she had hip replacement a few years back. I asked her about her skis because she had shorter skis. And that was actually one of my keys, was like, I need shorter skis. I need way less load on my body. I need to make this easier, shorter, fatter skis. She had the skis I liked. I was like,
Yeah.
she's like, oh yeah, I downsized. I had hip replacement. And then she started talking about, and now it looks like I'm going to need knee replacement. And I'm like, oh, I've heard Dr. David talk about this a lot. How, you get the one hip fixed and then either the other hip or the next knee or whatnot goes because you haven't fixed the underlying imbalance. So I told her about your YouTube channel, of course.
Oh, thank
But
you.
let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk about how, like, because people are going to think like, well, knee arthritis and hip arthritis, that's not the same muscle imbalance, or that's not the same blah, blah, blah. So yeah, go for it.
It is virtually the same muscle imbalance. An analogy I can give is, going back to obesity and not eating right and exercising, some people are just predispositioned. They're more likely to get diabetes than heart problems. And then vice versa. There's some people that I talk to these patients who are like, oh, my blood sugar's fantastic. How's your heart? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. They have the same condition. They're over too many calories in, not enough calories burned, but some people just their kidneys are a problem, other people's pancreas is a problem, and some people's heart's a problem. It's just it depends on your specific situation. And going back to the imbalance, it's the same imbalance, but some people get a hip problem first. Some people get the knee problem first. Some people get sciatica or back pain. It just varies. I think part of it is your shape. So like women tend to have wider hips, just the body build of women is a little bit different. It could be going back to your history or your activity. For example, like downhill skiing is something I love to do. I do it every season. It's so quad dominant. Like you just have to use the front of your thighs so much in the sport. It's just I haven't figured out a way around it. So what I do is I just endure it, and my hips and knees don't like me too much afterwards, but I know my limits. And then outside of skiing, I'm working on the other muscles that I need to work on so that I can have that balance in between. But at the end of the ski day, especially if it was a lot of skiing heavy on me, I just know my knees are gonna talk to me a little bit. But even leading up to the season, I've been purposefully working on my glutes extra because I want to ski. I enjoy it. But I know it's gonna
Yeah.
hurt my knees a little bit if I don't do that. I'm healthy. I feel fantastic. I
Yeah.
ran 3 miles the other day. I run regularly every week and still ski probably every weekend.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the things that I found, and I've been a habit coach for a long time. I created a certification program for yoga teachers called Yoga Health Coaching, and we're very heavy on habit evolution. So I'm big on certain principles on evolving habits, because one of the things I noticed from watching your videos is like I need to do these exercises multiple times a day, which
Hmm.
means I need to integrate them into my already existing lifestyle, my flow.
Yep.
And so one of the key habit evolution techniques that was very successful in our community of coaches with their members was architect your environment. So just build the habit into the environment that you're already in.
I love it.
Right. And so what I found was like, oh, if I and there's a number of habit triggers from this is from BJ Fogg's work at Stanford.
Uh-huh.
There's like 5 main habit triggers, and one of them is other people. Another one is location. So I combined like other people and location. So I'm a mom,
Uh-huh.
I have a kitchen, right? And I'm like, well, if I'm in the kitchen and there's other people, I'm just gonna like grab the counter and do my little donkey leg kicks and do all these things. And what's remarkable is how quickly the body changes. I
Oh
went
yeah.
from very atrophied, like I couldn't believe how, like once you tuned my awareness into that I couldn't contract my left glute.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm like, oh no, I have
All the time.
there's nothing, there's no connection between my brain and that musculature. And it's just been this slow, steady, daily evolution. I involve my family so that they can cheer me on, so that they can also just make sure that I'm doing it, I mean, because this is what I have
Yeah.
found really, really works rather than like, oh, I need to go to the stretching room or I need to go to a certain place to do this 5 times a day. It was like, no, complete integration into my lifestyle. When I wake up in the morning, I start doing the, whatever it is where you are lying on your side and your knees are together, the clamshells, and you open,
Yeah.
right? So I literally start and end I bookend my day with
Nice.
some of these exercises. I'm obviously highly motivated because I don't want to have the surgery and I want to be able to do all the fun things that I love to do.
Yep.
But one of the things that I discovered even yesterday, I was riding my snow bike in the canyon and I was like, okay. And I was listening to you on YouTube and I was like, okay, I need more external rotation. In the form
Hmm.
of yoga I practiced for years was very heavy on internal rotation before external rotation, and I overdid the inner. So that must have
Hmm.
also exacerbated the whole situation down. But one of the things I discovered is like I keep being able to pinpoint and fire and make burn muscles in my left glute, the lazy one, right,
Yep.
in new ways. So I'm just curious about like the typical. exploration cycle of some of your star patients and where that goes.
Yeah. Well, most of our clients that are starting in either our knee arthritis recovery program or the hip arthritis recovery program, they run into the same problem that you found is that they can't even make the muscle work. And it's almost like, how did I not know this? Like, when you said I brought it to your awareness, they have the same experience and they're typing us back on YouTube sometimes, or we have them on a live Zoom call like this, and we're talking to them and they're saying, yeah, I didn't even know my glutes couldn't fire all these years. I wonder how long that's been the case. Now it makes sense, the muscle imbalance that you're talking about. Yeah, every time I try to fire, this is the other one they'll say, I think about making my butt muscles work and my thighs tighten up instead. And I'm like, much how much more evidence do you need to prove that this muscle imbalance is a thing and that it's wreaking havoc on your poor joints? But so then we start there, step one, and all it is 10%, even 1%. Can you make the glute work just a little bit without everything else wanting to compensate and take over? So they start there. That's a progression, is just awareness and then starting to get the glute to work. And then it has to be a consistent thing. You can't just do this once a day for 5 minutes or 30 minutes even at this point. Like just to get your glutes to turn on, it has to be a constant thing all day. So I tell people hourly or even every 30 minutes while you're awake, think about tightening your glutes. And you have to be able to do it while you're sitting and while you're standing and while you're lying down. And the most successful people, they're obsessed. They're obsessed with getting their glutes to work. And I literally tell them that. I tell them, you need to get obsessed because if you don't, then the alternative is your muscles are going to stay weak, the glutes, which means you're going to compensate with the other muscles that have been causing you problems. And you're still on the pathway to having a replacement surgery at some point, either in the hip or the knee, depending on what bothers you most. But you just have to do this. There's no way around. And then, like you mentioned earlier, even if you don't do this and you end up having the replacement, people still are not satisfied with the replacement afterwards very often. And it's because the imbalance is still present even after they do the surgery. In fact, it's usually worse because now you have an operation to recover from.
Yeah.
You're off your feet for a while. You're not moving around normally. And guess what muscles are doing most of the work to get you to move around? The same ones that you've been compensating with. So it just exacerbates it most of the time. And it creates a situation where people are, of course, you're expected to be on a walker, on a cane for a little while after the surgery. But even after everything's healed up and it looks good, they're still using their muscles wrong and they still have pain 12 months plus after the surgery because they haven't figured out that muscle imbalance. We've had people come in who are years out of a replacement, a hip and knee, and they're saying this is a failed surgery. And we teach them how to fix the muscle imbalance, and all of a sudden they feel fantastic,
Mm.
even after they had the surgery done. And so then they start asking the question, they're like, did I even need the surgery? And I
Right.
have to shrug and raise my hands and say, I don't know. I didn't see you then, and I didn't see what your joint looked like then, or I didn't see how you moved around. Glad you're feeling better now, but who knows? And they're, of course, in their head, they're like, yeah, I didn't need that surgery. I went through all that trouble for nothing. I just needed to figure out that my butt muscles wouldn't turn on. I needed to make them work.
Totally. I just want to, I'm just so there for everyone that's in there because it is so, I mean, even for someone that, has a lot of body awareness or whatnot, it's just life can compound and it's hard to see, it's hard to see your own imbalances.
Yeah, and there's a struggle because you said the word body awareness and just got me thinking. There's a difference between being athletic and being able to maneuver your body very well, because some people are more athletic than others. But that's separate in my mind, the way that I approach people, that's separate from having conscious control over certain muscles. Because you, like, say skiing, for example, you might intuitively know how to move your legs and your body and all that to make your way down the mountain. Or riding a bike, similar thing. Like you just kind of figure it out and your body knows how to do that. But now try to use your glutes while biking
Yeah.
and make those the muscle that gets most tired while you're biking. It's like a whole other process that your brain has to go through. And even if you're great at being able to pick up an activity very fast,
Yeah.
it's it's different. I had a student one time that said it's like you're doing physical therapy left-handed, and I said that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know how to write with your hand or how to do stuff, but then when you have to do it left-handed, it feels awkward.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it is when you're trying to fire certain muscles and make that one get tired more than anything else.
That's exactly how it is. And I find myself doing things left-handed so that I can get it, so that I can back up enough to get it and slow down enough to find it.
Feeling stuck in modern life's chaos? You're not alone. I'm Kate Stillman, and I know that chronic inflammation isn't just stealing your health, it's limiting your entire future. Those symptoms you're battling, they're not your fault. They're the price of modern living. But here's what changes everything: strategic living. In Club Thrive, we don't just heal your body, we help you design your next chapter. Our proven system guides you to steer your life strategically, building financial resilience and a lifestyle beyond your current dreams. Ready to see who you could become? Visit clubthrive.global and click free training to take the Future You quiz. After the quiz, you'll receive a free 15-minute session with me, yours truly, to map out your deeper dreams. If Club Thrive is your path to purpose, we'll both know.
Yeah. Okay. So for people that have the bone on bone, let's talk about the whole bone on
Oh,
bone. Let's talk about pain. Let's talk about the
and get
pain
juicy.
studies. Well, when I was writing on inflamed, which was basically my answer to, the differentiation of chronic inflammatory diseases and diet and lifestyle from a little bit more of the Eastern traditions. I came across the research of Dr. Lorimer Mosley from Down Under. He's an Aussie, right? And he's looking at
Yep.
all of these MRIs from people that are quote unquote healthy, no pain, and people that are signed up for surgery, and they look the same.
Yep.
So yeah, and I know you've gone deep down this rabbit hole in terms of the research of like, what is pain indicating, what is bone on bone indicating. I also wanted to pitch into this conversation that our tendency as humans to defend our choices. So we already talked about it with the physicians, but I noticed we can also talk about it as the people who have had the surgery, or people who start to identify more with their diagnosis, go more into, well, I did hip surgery, so it was great for me and I needed it and blah, 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 regardless of all this research that's bringing into question the whole industry.
Yeah.
So tell me tell me where you've come to, what you think, some of your, whatever you want to talk about in this domain of pain, of diagnosis, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. So the research you're referring to, the whole idea behind it, they're adding to it little by little as we go on, but they're not very incentivized to do it, by the way. So the research is going to come out slow. Um, the fact that you can have a terrible looking X-ray, MRI on your knee or your hip. They've done a lot of this on the spine as well. Like you can have a herniated disc, pinched nerves, and feel just fine. You can move just fine, not have any pain. Like if you were normal, yet if a doctor were to be looking at your stuff, they'd say, I don't know how you're standing. I don't know how you're walking because this X-ray looks absolutely horrendous. And then the flip side of it is somebody has extreme pain, they're debilitated, and it's been like that for a while. And then they look at their images and they're like, this looks normal, looks like a completely healthy person. And those are just like the contrast. But you do see the people with bad X-rays and they have it lines up with their bad symptoms too. But what they're finding in the research is that it's not consistent. So you can't use X-rays and MRIs as a gold standard for diagnosing a certain problem and then the treatment as a result of that. Because if you have a very arthritic, end stage arthritis knee, as far as an X-ray, but the person's saying, I feel fine. We're not going to do surgery. The doctor's going to, of course, they're going to leave that appointment and the doctor's going to be telling them, come back when you're ready. We'll see you in a year or two, maybe even 6 months. That looks pretty bad. And they're just putting that in people's heads. And that's actually where the research is going now. They're going towards the words that physicians, surgeons are using when they literally say the words bone on bone, and then they connect it to an X-ray image that shows the parts of the knee touching, the thigh bone and the shin bone touching. So I have my model here. Here's the thigh bone, the femur, and here's the shin bone, the tibia. Here's the kneecap. I'm moving it out of the way. And then this bluish thing right here in the middle is the meniscus. That's a big chunk of cartilage. And then you still have cartilage on the end of the bone right here on the back of the kneecap. But on the x-ray, it looks like the meniscus is being squashed. And that's why they'll say it's bone on bone because it's touching. And what the surgeons looking at these x-rays are assuming, it's an assumption, which means they don't have hard information. It's just this, that's the best they can do right now because then they'd have to cut on you. They're assuming that the cartilage is gone. And they're connecting it to the grinding, popping sensations you might be getting or not. Depends on you. And then based on your pain, they'll make the recommendation for a knee replacement or not. But if we go back to this muscle imbalance concept, and this is what I harp on so much on social media and in our programs. In this same knee, you have quad muscles on the front, and those are the ones that are used to compensate for the weak butt muscles, the glutes. So when those quad muscles are overactive, then they start pulling the kneecap against the thigh bone because this is the quad tendon right here. They all come into the kneecap. And then there's a ligament that goes from the patella of the kneecap down to the shin bone, and the quads act on that too. So it pulls the shin bone up into the thigh bone, squashing the joint. An X-ray and an MRI are a snapshot. It's a picture. And just like if you took a picture of me as I walked into a glass door and my face was all smashed like this, it would look smashed. You caught me at a bad moment. That's what's happening to people's knees. They're catching them at a bad moment when their muscle imbalance is just really strong and it's squashing their poor joint because cartilage is squishy. There's different kinds of cartilage, but it's all a little squishy. That's what differentiates it from bone. It has to have some give. But if your muscles are just so out of balance and it's squashing it, it's going to look bone on bone. And depending on your symptoms and your motion really is what I look at, how much can you move? So the criteria that I use with patients is if you have 90% or better of your range of motion on your hip or knee that's bothering you compared to your other side, or another way of looking at it, if you look at it from the other end, is if you've only lost like 10% or less of your motion, then you have a good shot because that joint, that hip or that knee is functioning for you. It hasn't lost a lot of motion. But if it's a massive loss, like, you've lost half your motion or somewhere in that ballpark, that to me is strong evidence that the cartilage is truly too far gone. And you probably do need to have the joint replaced or some procedure. I won't be able to help you at that point. But if it's a minor loss, then what we have to work on is fixing the imbalance because you can depressurize that knee, just like you can get your face off the glass and then you're fine. And then you can give that cartilage a chance to heal. I think this mechanical part of hip and knee arthritis is extremely overlooked. And I'm talking about like the way the muscles and pull and add pressure to the joint. And it's a major component of arthritis. I think inflammation is a huge deal too. It's just not my specialty, so I don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about the mechanical side of it. But if you can take that pressure off, I think we could stand to see some research studies that can show a bone-on-bone knee that converted to a not bone-on-bone knee. I've not seen in that research if we can fix the muscle imbalance and unsquash it.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Just to, yeah,
I have to fund it myself, but then it's
I know it's gonna
by me.
So
That's all the research are, right? I mean, medications. You go up to doctors and the pharmaceutical reps will bring research studies from the same company that made the pills. Well, I'll play their game too. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. So even for the people that have lost more than 10% of mobility, if they have the hip replacement, it's still the same exercises.
For fixing the muscle imbalance, yes, but they have to first go through the rehabilitation, which is a different kind of treatment, different kind of therapy, if they have the surgery. And that's usually, a few months, depending on how long they take to recover.
Right. But then they're still just back at fix the muscle imbalance if they don't want to have the next joint replaced.
Right.
And to me, it's so important to highlight because when I looked at, because one of the things that I know, because I have had a number of surgeries, is you have to recover from the surgery, like just what you're saying, like you have to recover. So it's you're starting behind. Like if the
Right.
gun went off at the starting line, you're starting behind, right? It's
Def-
like if you haven't fixed the underlying chronic inflammation habits, they're not going to necessarily be easier to do once you're in a walker for a few weeks and trying to deal, or a few days or whatever, and just trying to, you're in survival mode after
Yeah.
surgery, like it or not. Your body has a massive inflammatory response to the surgery. Now you've got ice swelling, you've got people like waiting on you. You're not getting physical activity because you're slowed down. So it's harder. So even, I guess that's kind of my question is like, even for people who are like, oh, I'm not sure I might be over that 10%. Do you want to just speak to the importance of, or what you advocate in terms of like strengthening muscles before the surgery?
So 10% is kind of the guideline. It's not a hard and fast number. I don't have any research for that. This
Mhm.
isn't a researched thing that I'm
Yeah,
doing.
this is your experience.
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of training. It's less than 1% of the PTs in the world have finished kind of training that I have. And I train with the best in the world. But I use that as a guideline for speaking generally because we're, putting information out on YouTube and in our programs. And so I don't get to touch every single client anymore like I used to. But there's clients that have lost 30% of the range of motion and they got tremendously better. But I'm telling those people, I'm setting expectations with them prior, and I'm saying things like, it's a lot of motion that you lost, and you've lost it for months now. You might have some permanent changes that might be beyond what we can do here. But if you're still willing to proceed, let's go for it. And I've seen some people make enormous improvements. And they'll
Mhm.
tell you, I don't need surgery anymore. I still have pain here and there. I still have some issues, but I'm nowhere needing surgery like I was, a few months ago before working with you. So it's not a hard and fast rule of 10%. But I've found that if it's just a tiny loss of motion
Mhm.
and you're told bone on bone, people focus on the x-rays and the bone on bone. And then I
Mhm.
see them in person. I'm like, oh, your knee's moving fantastic. Your hip's moving great. What are you worried about? Who cares about the x-ray or the MRI? It doesn't matter right now. Don't pay attention to that. Let's just get your knee motion better and let's fix the muscle imbalance and see where we get from there.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a surgery anyway, because we have people that come in, they're like, I'm 78. The doctor told me that it's now or never. If I don't have the surgery now, I'm not going to be a candidate, next year in a couple of years because I'm going to be too old. There's a variety of reasons. And so they're set on doing the surgery, and I'm not going to change their mind. I'm not. I tell them there's potential for you to improve, whatever you want to do, though. But let's just prepare you for surgery anyway because you're going to still have the muscle imbalance afterwards. And they're open to that, and the recovery tends to be a lot smoother after surgery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, it's like I think of my mom and she had, I can't remember which, I think the knee was first, the hip was next, and it's common, right? So if we don't, maybe you're just like, even if like work on the next one before this one. So let's talk a little bit about in terms of how you're training people, like how much like manual manipulation versus exercises at your actual clinic in El Paso are you training your PTs that are working
Yeah.
with knee and hip arthritis?
I do need to tell you, we do have a clinic and we have treatments happening every day, but they're not our main focus right now. We're focused on helping people through online services. But as far as the hands-on part of it, it expedites the improvement. It because when what we're doing literally is
Yeah, what are you doing?
make it so if this was your knee, for instance, and it didn't have the best motion in it, we have techniques to specifically get all the motions freed up that you don't have, but that doesn't last terribly long. I mean,
Right.
in some cases, a few hours on the low end. Some people will get up to a week of relief. And all we're doing when we free them up is then we're saying, okay, your knee, that last 10% of motion that you're missing, you got it back. We got it back right now in this technique we just did in a couple of minutes. Now you have to get your glutes working. Now you have to do the same stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It helps get you there a little faster. When you're talking about that race, it just moves you up 100 feet, maybe a mile, depending on how long the race is, so that you can get to the goal a little quicker, a little faster. But manual therapy in itself, I think it's an amazing field. Obviously, I've studied into it quite a bit, but it's not the long-term fix. It's a short-term fix. I think it's very necessary for some people. Some people will make much more better quality improvements if they can get some hands-on work done,
Yeah.
but it's not absolutely mission critical for most people.
Yeah. Well, and back to the words that the doctor speaks, like how much is it that people need attention, that they need connection, that they need someone in their life that's trying to help them with something that, because my guess is that that plays quite a big part into them getting them to do the exercises for certain
Oh yeah.
people.
The accountability, yeah, because you're showing up at a place, you have an expert that's going to tell you, hey, did you do your exercises? What are you having trouble? Do we need to adjust it or do something different, but still meet the goal? Like, yeah, so that plays an enormous role in it. And we're doing that online too in our programs, our arthritis programs. We're meeting weekly on Zoom. We have group coaching calls. We have one-on-one calls available if you want to upgrade to that. And then we have an online community where people can go in and post updates, and my team's in there answering questions. So there's definitely a lot of accountability built into this because the reality, if you have arthritis, especially knee arthritis or hip arthritis, because for the people the problems that younger people get, like the meniscus tears, ACL issues, tendonitis, those aren't as tough to compete with. But the arthritis things, once you're like your age with your condition, 50s, 60s, 70s, beyond, you start to get hip and knee arthritis, then the whole world starts coming after you. You should just get the replacement. You
Oh
should do
yeah.
these stretches. You should do this. This worked for me. Change your diet. Do this, do that. And everybody starts giving you their solicited and unsolicited advice. And so it creates a situation for our clients, especially when we're telling them, don't work out your quads, because that's the muscle, that's the main problem in your arthritis issue. And then they go tell their physical therapist or their surgeon or their doctor, and they're like, that guy's some crazy guy on the internet. Don't listen to
Right.
him.
Yeah.
So it's an uphill battle. So that's why we created that community and the weekly calls to give them that encouragement on a consistent basis, and then have other people along the journey join them that are saying, hey, I tried this. Maybe they're a little farther along and they're saying, I stopped working my quads out and I felt so much better. I would have that
Mm.
evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole point of creating like a micro culture within the larger culture that is really results based and geared towards people sharing their stories so that there's encouragement for the new people coming in. It sounds like that's all high
Yep.
functioning and working.
And it's such an uphill battle, especially with the quads thing. I feel like that's what I get attacked for the most. I don't know if attack's kind of an aggressive word. I guess challenged on is a better term. Um, because there's a lot of research out there showing that doing quad exercises improves hip arthritis and knee arthritis. But if you look closely at the research and how they did it and what exercises they did and the length of time that they did those exercises for, I think there's a lot of faults in the research because it's possible that you're not flared up right now in your hip or your knee
Mm,
and you haven't done any exercise. You've been kind of a couch potato. And then you go do some quad exercises, which is the first exercise you've done in who knows how long.
mm,
Well, guess what? You're going to feel better because you just started moving.
yeah. Yeah.
But then keep going and you feed that muscle imbalance and you get those quad muscles stronger and stronger and stronger. It's just a matter of time before the joint itself starts to say, this is too much. You're squeezing the heck out of me. I'm irritated now. I'm tearing. I'm in pain. That research hasn't been done.
Yeah. So in terms of people that are wanting to help themselves but are in pain, I just want to hit the inflammation part again with, often when we're in pain, then we're looking for, we're just maybe all of a sudden like, oh, I want ibuprofen, I want more ibuprofen, or wow, alcohol seems to numb it out, or, just people reach for these alternative strategies, or I'm not moving as much, so now I'm eating more. And now we have an inflammatory load on top of an already inflamed joint. So I'm just kind of curious, are in your community, is it in part people are inspired by each other's progress and weaning off some of these crutches? I'd love to hear.
Yes, they're so we do something called form checks. We try to do it every week, and it's amazing because there's people that have, hip arthritis and knee arthritis. And in the program, we have different phases for the program. It's phase 1 through phase 4. Phase 1 is when you're very inflamed, which is where most people are starting out in our program. They're having trouble being on their feet, walking. Sometimes they have range of motion losses, and pain is happening most days of the week. There's certain activities for them to do there. And then once they start moving into phase 2, we have them activating certain muscles and then strengthening the muscles and then doing higher level activities in phase 4. And as they're progressing through these phases, they'll reach a point where they'll start to do certain exercises, like a squat, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
To tell somebody with knee arthritis or hip arthritis, you're going to do a squat. They're like, the doctor said, no, I can't do that. The therapist told me to stay away from they have this cognitive dissonance that they're like, you're crazy. That doesn't make sense. But then we'll tell them, no, 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 no. You're going to do a little baby squat. Literally, you're just going to sink down like an inch. And you have to use your glutes, not your quads, which you've already been practicing. We went over that already. You crossed that milestone. So that's how we get them comfortable to doing that. Then they have a video taken of them that their loved one, or they'll set up the phone to take a video themselves. And it's amazing seeing them share in the community where they're starting to squat and it doesn't hurt them. And some of
Mm.
them get down real low, like thighs parallel, and they're using their butt muscles and their knees feel fantastic. And you just see this progression. So if you were to join the community right now, you can go through and see all the posts in the past. And we put our group coaching calls, the replays in there as well. But you can also see the chit chat that happens. Some of these people are making friendships outside of the group. It's phenomenal to see what's happening as a result of this. I wish we would have started it sooner.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Last question around fascia and how much in the arthritic pattern the fascia, the connective tissue, is holding the pattern in, and what you see with how the fascia changes or ways to accelerate that into the healthy pattern, the muscle balance pattern.
Yeah. Fascia, there's either pronunciation works. I say fascia. It adapts to whatever you tend to do. It's got a lot of nerves in it as well, so it's giving you a lot of feedback. We call that proprioception. Like it tells you where your body is in space and what muscles you're using. So the act of you getting your brain to consciously control certain muscles, like the glutes, the butt muscles, starts to influence the nerves that go down there, and then you start to move better. You start to move different. The fascia will adapt as long as you're constraining your body to work in a certain motion and with certain muscles. What we'll do here in the clinic for patients is move the tissue. So if we're, for instance, working on a knee, there's muscles on the front of the thigh, the quads here, and we'll get in there and move, and we can actually feel the adhesions and the stiff spots in the muscle, to put it simply. And we call it deformation or deformation. We'll move the tissue and get it to free up. And it is incredible the amount of flexibility that you'll feel in your stiff arthritic knee or your hip after just having somebody work on it. And we teach our online clients to do it as well. We tell them to go get one of those massage guns.
Yeah.
They're all over the internet. You'll see them at the stores as well. They look like drills, and they have like a ball on the end. They
Yeah.
have different attachments. They used to be like $400 when they first came out. Now you can get them for like 50 bucks on sale, or get like a little tiny one for less than that sometimes. Those things are great because it doesn't take much skill to use it. You don't have to, be a physical therapist. And you just get in on there on your thigh where it's tender and achy. Spend literally, Kate, I'm not even joking, 3-4 minutes on it, and then see how your hip and knee moves afterwards. And you're like, wow, so much better. It doesn't have to be a massage gun. You can get in there with your hand. There's other massage tools. There's some that look like a rolling pin. You can get a lacrosse ball or a, tennis ball, something just firm to move the muscle, and you're deforming the fascia so that it's set up to now move the way that you intend to move it rather than the way that your body's been compensating to move. that allows you to fix the pressures around your joints so that you're not irritating it more with mechanical forces.
Yeah, I love that. And I love just how you're helping people heal themselves, rather than go for the quick fix of surgery, to get the tools, to use the tools to help themselves.
Yeah, the body's so wise, wiser than us. We just have to work with it.
We just have to get off our butts and use our butts. I love it. Well, it's been such a pleasure. I just want to point people back to your website because I know they're like, who is she talking to again? I'm talking to Dr. David Middaugh, and it's EP Manual Physical Therapy, both on YouTube, on the website, on Instagram. The way I remember to tell people is just that El Paso Physical Therapy, and that seems to be enough for people to remember. Anything else you want to mention?
Gosh, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Just
We covered a lot. We really
yeah,
did.
we did. We went deep in a lot of things. I think we have online programs that are paid and you get more attention to it, but there's so much free stuff that we post weekly on YouTube. If you just go to our YouTube channel, you'll get tons of help, just like you've been. And that's my intent with all this is I want to help out people that can't afford to work with us or maybe don't trust us yet. Just go try our free stuff. If you think we're crazy about not working out the quads, give it a shot. What have you got to lose? Yeah, I mean, the alternative is you might end up with surgery one day. It's going to make you feel a lot better. We post all that stuff for free on YouTube for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.